there.
It's 6:30 in Reedfield, Maine. Please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Amen.
Welcome to the January 8th, 2018 Select Board meeting, the first meeting of the new calendar year. I hope everybody had a nice holiday season and so forth. We'll proceed through the agenda here, and are there any changes that we need to consider on the agenda?
Just to welcome Christy.
Okay, I will mention that Mr. Dyer is ill, and will not be here tonight. So as we go
Nope.
through, if there are particular questions that would normally be directed to him, we can either, if they're of a immediate nature and need to be addressed, please ask them at town hall, or as a board, if we have a question, we can certainly direct that to him as appropriate. We'll proceed with 18-077, which is the minutes for the, the minutes for the Select Board meeting of December 11th, 2017.
I would make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes as presented. Is there any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. The warrant, 25 through 28. Chris?
Okay, the warrant number 27 was the one that has the school payment, so it was $293,966.33 for that, and it has the snow removal payment, $26,795.56. And the other thing of note is the holder repair, which just seems to keep going on. It was $7,299.
That's Chadwick,
Ross.
Yes, okay.
And was
So-
that the whole charge for that?
Well, I would have to ask Eric which charge, because we got it fixed, and Anna went from the Marana Cook School to the
Fairgrounds.
fairgrounds, and it stopped. So,
But that was just an alternator problem, I believe.
Right, I believe it was an alternator and that something needed to be.
Seals.
Yes. And
But
so
this-
those were shipped up, I believe, later than when this.
But we had authorized 14 something, and so I know Eric said it came in less, but did it
Yeah.
come in at half?
well, it's,
I mean, because that's what this amount
That's what
is,
the-
so.
Only he will be, I would assume.
Able to tell us that.
Yeah, so
to
there
be
there
that
could have been
specific.
more in process or parts to be charged later, so.
So
And I
Chris,
also
maybe you could
noticed-
make a note of
Yeah.
that if you're taking notes, thank
Yeah.
you.
I noticed that Anna did the sidewalk with a different piece of equipment, which I think, it's a Bobcat with a snow blower.
Yep.
I believe that's something that Eric was looking at.
yeah, they let us
down the road
use it.
to- Yeah, yeah.
Well, that got a lot of use, because
I'll
that
tell you
took
what, she
her
did,
hours and
she did a
hours
heck
and
of a job
hours.
on that thing. Boy, that was,
Well, she not only cleaned up the old snow, and then she turned around and had to clean up
Yeah.
the new snow.
Yeah.
And that piece of equipment did a heck of a job.
yeah,
Very slow, though, by comparison,
yeah.
very
It is.
slow.
Back to the warrant?
Yes,
Back to the warrant.
thank you. I digress us.
So the warrant is $389,733.68. The
No.
payroll is $14,316.66. So the total warrant, 25 through 27, is $404,050.34. And I move that we accept that.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept warrants 27 through 28, including 27A, in the amount of $404,050.34. Is there any further discussion?
I just have a question. Where is the 25 coming from? It says warrants 25 through 28. We have 27, 27A, 28.
Was 20.
It might be in the packet, which of course We know
Those would have been warrants that I believe would have been state
So
payments.
the ones that are like
Those are
easy
price.
peasy, right out, okay, gotcha.
Normally,
I had a question.
those also are.
Make it in.
made
Well, that's
in
why-
here
that's
so we
why
can
I-
make approval.
But
Right.
he-
And
Eric-
even the-
Eric wasn't here to do that today.
Eric was not here to
Right,
do
and
that.
so they were not.
Oh, roger that.
Okay,
Yes,
so
indeed. Okay. So
on
in fact-
on those warrants, I would expect to still see them at our next meeting, not Thursday nights, because that's a workshop only.
Right.
And we could approve those. But we have authorization on signature to approve those state
Okay.
payments anyhow.
All right.
Under our administrative,
Okay. I just
Could you-
didn't, I was. thought
Could
I'd
you
res-
add that to our list, Chris? That Dennis wanted to see 25 and 6.
Well, I don't want to approve anything.
Well, no, but that's what we promised the town, and it's what we believe in, is transparency, so it needs to be published.
so we have the motion on the floor. Thank you for the question. Is there any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. We'll circulate this for your signature. Consider the resignation of John Moran from the Age Friendly and Cemetery Committee. John's resignation is copied in your packet. I believe he has moved. And John has a very long legacy of service within the community on various committees. I believe he has served on this board at one time as well. So I would move that we accept his resignation with regrets and best wishes.
I second that.
Second that. And also, I believe he was given some type of memento.
Yes, he was.
Was in the
Thank you
messenger.
type of thing, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, John has done a lot of work in town, served on a lot of committees and boards, so
Yep.
he'll be missed.
So, any other discussion? All in favor of the motion? Thank you. I did have a second on that, didn't I, Kristen? Okay.
I second it,
Yes,
not as
great.
a concurrence, but in fact a second.
Mr. Priest is not here, and I can't ask Eric whether or not he was going to be here, so I would say let's not take action on this and table it.
Right, because it's not consecutive reappointment.
And Sean,
There's the door.
Sean is,
The same thing.
he's new as well, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Do-
We heard the door,
Like my
so
dog.
we will act on these if they show up, okay? Is that fine with people?
I like that,
And I
Bruce.
have the originals here if we need them.
Okay,
Yes.
great. I'll move on to note that we have, there will not, let's go to Select Board Communications. And I'll just start that out with a couple of quick notes myself. We've had some pretty heavy-duty storms. I really appreciate neighbors who looked in on neighbors and so forth. Very, very cold weather, so we've had a lot of issues with snow clearance and just people getting in and out and so forth. So I commend everybody who's helped out on that matter, in that matter. I also wanted to mention that the library is having, I believe, an open house on Wednesday night you may have more details on
It's
that.
actually all from 2 to 7:30, I believe.
From 2 to 7:30.
Yeah, open house refreshments to meet the new librarian.
Yep.
Oh,
Who
nice,
is a Reedfield resident.
Yes.
nice.
Great. Other board members?
I heard from my husband, and I have to admit I wasn't paying complete attention because now I can't remember.
No
But I
way.
believe he said, I don't know. I was going to say Belgrade, but I don't think Belgrade has its own police force. But there's a town in Maine who has taken it upon themselves that their police check in with their elderly residents or people who are living alone
I saw that as well.
weekly, and they have found a phenomenal number of people in need. Like maybe 3 or 4 in a month, who either had fallen or who hadn't been able to get out and no one had checked on them because of snow plowing issues and so on. And so I know that part of our emergency operations plan is that we have a list of those people who have requested that we would check in on them, and that maybe that's something the Age Friendly Committee might want to look at as a task that we could divvy up for different volunteers around town to just make sure that we're checking in on our neighbors, because if there isn't a neighbor handy, that may still be a resident that, a daily pop in, you know, just to see that the car moved or something.
I mean, it's.
Could save a life.
Yeah, it's tough if somebody falls down, can't get up, and can't tell anybody.
Right. So, you know, just food for thought.
That's a good idea.
I would just like to say that the website is phenomenal. I really think we look like a,
Good.
Better.
Well organized and,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's
nice.
Slick.
yeah, very nice website.
I've noticed that a few things aren't completely correct, so
No, they're.
did I bother to take the time yet to write that down? No.
But
I shall.
It's a work in process, they're working.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
it's a tremendous amount of work, and it's updating kinds of things. It's
Yeah.
not mistakes, so
I think,
just
I
tremendous
think
job.
Kristen had a lot to do with that, right?
Yeah.
A lot, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Anyone else?
I just want to say, Bruce, that especially if people are watching, listening, YouTubing, or however they listen to this meeting, the budget process is getting underway. And this week, what I did was I put it all into a calendar document. I hope that everyone got it from Eric, and hopefully everyone will be able to follow along on the new website, the budget process calendar, the way that things are scheduled, the planning, and all that stuff. Because I think part of one of the reasons why I joined this board was because I want people to know when these things are happening. So as we get into it, if you have things that are important to you, follow along and know when the right time to come to the meetings are, because it does no good to sort of be late to the party. And knowing is half the budget battle, to borrow from G.I. Joe. So I guess, you know, I just want to plug that, especially with the new website, the new year, the new budget cycle. I hope people can get involved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's true. I think too many times when I was on the budget committee that people would show up at the tail end of everything when the select board was actually voting on different articles and wanted to make changes, and that's really
Too late.
too late. The process is long. If anybody has any particular interest in a certain part of the budget, or the whole budget, they should try to
Follow along with
follow
the
along,
schedule
exactly.
available on the new website, reedfield.org. Is
Yep.
that the website?
Well, as we close out comments here, I would just remind people that the very last budget hearing is, the warrants have been set. So so that hearing is on whether or not you support that warrant article, and that's what we want to hear. That's not where we can change things.
Right.
The process before that is where things happen.
Here,
And
here.
we perfectly welcome people to come at that very last meeting and say, I don't like that, I'm going to vote against it, all my neighbors should, or I love that, and I'm going to support it, and all my neighbors should. That's what the purpose of that meeting is for.
And to make sure people understand what's in it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, I just have to say, every single email address to get in touch with us, phone numbers, things like that are on the website. I just don't suffer in silence.
Well, and I think it might be just a little bit confusing in hearing you say that, because we've said that the public input meetings are on specific dates, but public input can be given at any budget meeting, either of the select board listening or the budget committee listening. It's just that we've opened up those two particular dates for just the public to comment, not to hold any other business on the budget.
And again, those meetings are listed on the website, on the calendar, in the budget process.
Okay, thank you. Are you Sean? I am. Sean, how are you tonight? Welcome, I'm glad you showed up. We'll go back and chat with you now. Would you mind going up to the microphone?
Yeah, come on up.
Sean, most of what we do here is see if you have anything you want to ask us or anything you want to say, and if anybody has a question here, but to thank you for, applying to serve on the Recreation Board, and welcome.
Thanks, I don't really have anything to say. I've kind of been helping out for a couple of years with soccer mostly. I love it, so I've got 3 kids, so I decided I'd take a part in that. So then they asked me if I'd be willing to maybe do something else too, so, yeah.
Hey, why not, right?
Yeah.
Well, and I really liked your reason about anything that keeps kids engaged off of a screen.
Yeah,
That's, as a school teacher, I have a lot of trouble with that in the classroom, and I'm very proud of you for making that a stand. So
yeah,
thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah, it's important to me, you know, we see so much kids doing the same thing. You know, how many kids live in this town? How many do you see when you're out driving? We
Right.
should see more of them, you know.
And the exercise of a sport is good for them, being outside, all of that is good stuff. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
And as you've seen, I'm sure, the rec board is very, very, very active.
Yeah.
A lot of good people on there, and, you know, thank God for them. for
Yeah,
you
it's a
guys.
busy group of people, a lot of great parents in town, and, you know, really want to do a lot of fun stuff, so I think there's always stuff we can do.
So Sean, you're filling out a term that goes through June of 2018, is that correct?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
but your interest is long-term.
Yeah, actually, yeah, definitely. I mean, my youngest is 3, so,
Great.
you know.
You got a while yet, huh?
I got a few years to stay involved, for sure.
Well, I'd like to make a motion to appoint Sean Keegan to the Rec Board for a period of time beginning tonight, 1/8/18 through 6/30/18.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or anything you would ask?
Thank you, Sean.
No, I'm good.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you.
it sounds like everything's getting in shape here to approve you. We have a motion, so all in favor? Welcome aboard.
Thanks very much.
Let it be so.
That's it.
And you're welcome to stay, but you're welcome to leave.
Yeah.
Oh, good, yeah, that's right, the audience. You don't ever have.
And here
Okay,
comes the
we'll,
paper around.
Sure.
Sorry. Wimpy throw.
Eric isn't here tonight, as I mentioned earlier, he's ill. For boards, committees, and commissions, there is, in your packet, a library board minutes of October 11, 2017, and the cemetery committee minutes for November 17, 2017. Thank you to both of those committees for their reports and their time and their minutes being shared with us. So, open for public communication. Are you here to speak?
Well, Eric asked that I come here, and he had papers that didn't he circulate any? Do you know why I'm here?
No,
I do.
I think I do. I read something about you in here, right?
Was it salacious?
No, no.
It's Bob Batar.
Yeah, Bob, I do the budget plan, I do the agenda planning,
Yes.
and I know that Eric had talked with you, and that we were going to have you at one of our board meetings in January, but it was not this one.
That's where I read it was on the future agenda
Yeah, this was
items.
already locked, this agenda was already locked in, so,
Yes, and because we spoke, and he knew that my wife is seriously ill, and actually, she's seriously she just got out of the hospital in 2 months.
Mhm.
So, just out of the hospital, so I have to take her to another place just to get to be safe. But, no, we spoke about this, and I was supposed to speak tonight. And you were supposed to be prepared with some materials and so on.
yeah, we do not have them.
No
How do you like that?
No material, no Eric.
But
Well,
I
as a
do,
member
I
of the
do
public-
remember in actually setting the agenda, that he told me that would be forthcoming.
Let me try to be brief.
Okay, sure.
There you go. As a member of the public.
Since I'm not going to be here. Late September, I went to the planning board and requested, you probably know that I'm engaged in a project on Mill Stream Road. We're building buildings there and so on. And it's completed, actually, everything is done. And I went to the planning board and I requested that they review a petition, or at least their consent to think about rezoning that as a commercial property. Anyway, So that was the purpose of that. They said they couldn't find a quorum to consider this, and they said, after considering it every week, every other week, we're into March or something like that to find a quorum to consider this proposal, and it's to, essentially, that proposal would have been brought here, and I think I'm going to be meeting with them on the 10th, which is in 2 days, to discuss this again. Eric thought it would be a good thought to bring it here, because it's going to be a warrant, hopefully, that will be presented on the June budget. And the question is, the property is zoned now for a club or some kind of other organizational structure, and that would have been fine, but it's supposed to be and is designed to be a center for the town. And as such, and as a center that will be able to do something for the town as part of this central Millstream Park area, it's going to need some kind of money. You have to do that to maintain that whole area, to build it up, to maintain it, to make it grow. And so for that reason, to do it as a club, which is possible, is one of the things we can do and would. I mean, it's part of the zoning possibility, but it would be clearer and easier and probably more direct if we did it as a commercial venture. So for that reason, there was a lot set aside for that, and that will be the nature of the warrant to approve, to vote on the town's approval for change of zoning to that series of lots. And the purpose of it, it's I think, well, first of all, it's part of the historical basis of this town. It's the oldest building in the town. It's been restored. It's been restored to a point at which I think it's probably the most interesting, most wonderful building north of Portland. I think it's spectacular. And it's all post and beam, it's all timber frame. And the new building that went up is also timber frame. And you have two structures. One is historic, and the other is by someone who studied with John Libby, at least worked with him, a fellow who does timber frame on the coast, famous. And this fellow designed that new enormous barn structure. Now, the barn structure is approximately 50 feet by 60 feet and it's got a stage in there. It's supposed to be something that's really going to invite the town to create not a formal form of entertainment. We have a place, you have the school, which is a lovely auditorium, but this is something that's for everybody. It's an event center. It's a place that's going to be really nice. It is nice, and it's designed to be extraordinary. So that's the nature of what's there. Part of it was we've already deeded easements to the town so that we can restore part of the dam. And we've also have an easement that goes right through through the center part of the property to the historic place on the top of that hill, and that takes up a good part of the property. So that's another easement that's part of the town as well. So that easement's, we have to finish. Anyway, ask a question if you want.
I don't think we can actually discuss it tonight.
Okay.
I think it should go to the planning board.
It will.
You're seeing them on the 10th.
On the 10th, yeah.
So I think without the information here, it would be improper for us to have discussion on it tonight. But
Okay.
Bob, I'm glad you made the comment within citizen comments tonight so that there's some awareness on the matter.
Right.
So I will follow through on where that's appearing on our agenda and
That's great.
what information we need to get. And so that further communication with you on the matter will will be occurring. I did know about it, and my assumption was it was going to be in our second January meeting, but if that's incorrect, we'll figure that out.
Yeah.
Okay, Bob?
Good.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
you.
Any other citizen comments? Thanks, Bob. We'll move on to consider a revised contract for the town manager. And I'll just simply say
Which I have
that,
here for us to sign.
excuse me?
I have here for us to sign.
Yes. Let me just start by saying we did review the town manager. We did complete his annual review, and we felt that he met or exceeded every single expectation on all parameters that we set forth, which really is a verification of his previous reviews. And he also had some goals that he shared with us and made progress on his prior goals as well. We did ask him to narrow the list of goals a little bit, because he has very many. He's an ambitious person. We did receive feedback from a number of different people. It was positive, and we'll figure out how to continually gather even broader feedback in the future. So we had 2 executive sessions, one where we talked as a board and developed the final evaluation, if you will, and then a second one, executive session, where we performed the review with Eric. And so in front of you tonight is an employment agreement contract. And basically, the way we've been handling this is we've been giving Eric a 3-year contract, and each year we review it and decide whether we will extend it for an additional year. So we've had a year expire, and so this would extend this particular contract. The change in the contract, the only change is in personal time off, which it was 15 days per year, and it's 18 days per year. And I think that's very reasonable, and it's kind of in keeping with remember with paid time off, that this is his vacation time, his sick time, and his personal time rolled into one. So it's very much in line in keeping with what people get when they have separated sick time and vacation time. As a matter of fact, it may even be a little less generous, I would say. But I certainly think it's very appropriate.
Well, and as Eric pointed out, one of the other things that people may notice that could be different from someone else's contract is that he does have health insurance for his entire family. And that was one of the things he originally negotiated with the select board that hired him, that he would have a slightly lesser wage and slightly less time off in exchange for having that health care coverage.
Correct.
So, and that has not changed.
Well, I'd like to move that we approve the contract with Mr. Eric Dyer as presented to us for the period that begins with the effective date of October 1, 2017, and for 3 years.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I'm glad we have Eric Dyer as our town manager. And I'm glad he's back.
Yes.
And I'm sorry he's sick tonight.
Yeah.
Get
Sorry,
well.
he's sick.
Not just because he's missing our meeting, but he doesn't feel well.
Well, Eric has worked for us for 2 years, and I couldn't be more pleased with the direction that we're going in, and I couldn't be more pleased with the fact that he's chosen to be a member of this community in addition to our manager. It's just nice that he's right down the road here and is a member of the community.
He and his family certainly have made the commitment to
Yep.
the town.
Absolutely.
They support a lot of events. They're there.
Here, here.
And
So-
he's brought a lot to town government as well, really expanded things.
And it's still a work in progress. We look at reports and figure out how we can make them more conducive. We try to look at how we might do things differently and refine things. And there have been challenges too, and he's risen to those, so I really appreciate it. So we do have a motion on the floor. Is there any discussion on the motion? Any further discussion? All in favor? Thank you. We'll sign that contract, and we will proceed. And Andrew, you're up.
Your timing was perfect.
That was Eric. He was the one who told me to be here at 7.
There we go.
How did he know?
He knew.
I'm just going to take a second and see if I can get set up here so
Oh,
we
sure.
can all look at the same stuff at the same time.
Why don't we take a brief stretch break for 2 minutes?
Love that idea.
How's that sound, Andrew?
Great.
We generally try
Chris,
to do that, actually.
Is that signed by everybody for Sean?
So we're taking a quick break for a couple of minutes.
John? John?
Hey, John.
Earlier I thought I knew him, but now I know. Yeah, roger that.
Oh, did we lose it? Okay. We can turn and look up there.
Yeah.
So anyhow, we are having a presentation tonight from Revision Energy, and this is to discuss a prospective municipal solar project in town. John and I have been involved in this, site walking, and a couple of preliminary meetings with Andrew. Andrew, I'll let you introduce yourself and proceed with the presentation. Welcome.
Thanks, Bruce, and all the members of the committee. Thank you very much for taking some time to explore your renewable energy goals with me tonight. As Bruce mentioned, he and John and Eric and I have been working together since the spring, when I first came in to address the select board to talk about the possibility of starting a project. We've taken a look at a few potential sites around the town, and our work to this point has been to try to arrive at a design that was the best that we could think of to build consensus in the town for a solar project. But it's really just in a development stage right now, so we are able to turn the dials on the project as we move forward. But I think that we're all pretty confident that we've arrived at a really interesting project, and possibly the best one that is available at this time. And so I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. How many people were here back in the spring when I came to visit to do a very general presentation?
All
Okay,
except
great.
for the newbie.
Well, nice to see you all again. Hey, Dennis. Nice to meet you. So just a very brief introduction then, since everybody's heard it before. Revision Energy is a company that started in Liberty, Maine. And this year we're 15 years old. We are now an employee-owned company, a 100% employee stock ownership program. That just happened about 3 months ago. I've been with the company now for about 3 years. I am an employee owner. We are a certified B Corp, and we are a mission-driven company. Our mission is to speed the renewable energy transition in northern New England until we get to the 100% renewable energy system. We do get a ton of sunshine in New England. We're on the same line of latitude as Barcelona and the French Riviera. Germany is generally considered the world leader in solar. They're up about where the F is in French Riviera, far to the north of us. So we have abundant solar resource here in Maine, and hopefully we can make that work for the town of Reedfield. We've got some information about power purchase agreements here. While we have our discussion tonight, we have two different options that we're going to be looking at. You will probably find that I'm going to be discussing power purchase agreements more often than I am discussing a simple bonded buyout. The reason I will be talking about them more is because it is a more complicated instrument. But I want you to consider it as a financing option. As far as Revision Energy is concerned, we are equally happy with a project that moves forward as a power purchase agreement or a PPA, or simply, from our perspective, a cash purchase, or from your perspective, a bonded year one purchase of the project. But we will be talking about power purchase agreements because they are more complicated, but also because I think you're going to find there are some pretty compelling arguments for doing a power purchase agreement as well, as we get into this a little bit more. A power purchase agreement, very briefly, is a system that allows a tax-exempt organization, such as a municipality, to take advantage of the really huge tax benefits that are available for solar projects at this time. When we do a commercial project for a profitable company, they're able to take between 50 and 60% of the project cost back in the first 6 years of operation in the form of tax benefits. And so with a power purchase agreement, you have a capital partner who purchases that system on behalf of the municipality and owns it for 6 years, which is long enough to monetize all of those tax benefits. And that allows the buyout cost of the system for the municipality to be paid down via tax benefits in the first few years of operation, so that starting in year 6 or year 7, you have an annually renewed option to purchase the system at roughly 60% of its original installation cost. So it can be a significant savings if the rest of the factors line up properly. And we'll take a look at your specific situation here as we move forward. Any general questions about PPAs and power purchase agreements and how they work?
Yes.
Audience members are welcome to ask questions too.
Did you have a question, Bruce?
No, I don't. Go ahead, please.
So I think you've just explained the part that I couldn't figure out last night when I was reading all of this. Essentially, the investor will get all of the tax benefits, the rebates, and the depreciation. And then they sell the system to us after they've taken all of that. And that's how we make the system cost less. And this is a government-approved process, of course.
Yes, that's all correct.
Okay.
So there are a number of revenue streams in a power purchase agreement that accrue to the capital partner or the investor. They are the two different types of tax benefits. That's the solar investment tax credit and accelerated depreciation. There are payments made by the town of Reedfield to the investor during the period of the PPA. And there are the sale of renewable energy credits, which for all intents and purposes are like carbon credits that the system will generate in addition to electricity. And so all of those revenue streams flowing to the investor are essentially buying down the purchase cost of the system during the period of the PPA. So that if the town decided to purchase it in year 7, it would be one price, and in year 8, it would cost somewhat less to purchase that system, because you would have continued to pay energy payments to the investor during that intervening year.
But at some point, the host does have to buy out the investor. That's part of the original agreement?
Great question. So the answer is no. The option to purchase is just that, and you can remain in the PPA for a term of 25 years with a possibility of 2 5-year extensions. Though in this particular case, probably at the end of 25 years, it's likely that the residual cost of the system would probably be somewhat similar to the next year's energy payments. So it'd be almost just like turning it over to you at that point. So a term PPA is a potential option, and at the end of 25 years, if you chose not to extend the PPA, chose not to purchase the system, then the investor, the capital partner, it would be their responsibility to come and remove all of that solar electric equipment and leave the site as it was before it was there, at no cost to you.
But what the multi-year upfront agreement does is it really provides the capital that the town pays back over time, if you will, to allow a project of such magnitude to go forth and still keep us, we'll be using that energy, number one, but also keep us within a budget avenue that makes sense for a municipality. I mean, that's why this instrument is kind of structured in the way that it is.
Great point, Bruce. We're going to take a look at some cash flow line graphs coming up here. And one thing that's important to mention is that in the cash flow that you have that's on a grid, as well as the graphs that we look at, energy savings is represented as positive income. Just to be clear about that, there will be a very slight income for a few years, which is from those renewable energy credits, but that's very small compared to the savings that are available from the system. The system is always stacked up against what you would otherwise pay the utility company for your electricity going forward.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you for your question. Oops. So this is the, yeah.
Do you have, probably the majority of the projects that you do are through a PPA?
The
As
vast
opposed to a
majority of
cash
the,
purchase upfront?
yeah, the vast majority of the projects that we do for municipalities, schools, churches, and nonprofits are done through power purchase agreements. It's an extremely common way of buying electricity, whether it's from solar or some other source nationwide and internationally. Even some large commercial projects are funded with PPAs if a certain company, for instance, just doesn't have enough of a tax liability to monetize all those tax benefits, or for other reasons don't want to have it on their balance sheet. PPAs are a very popular product, very commonly used, and considered a very typical way to move forward with an energy project in the United States. So this is an engineer's rendering that is a general idea about where the solar panels might go at the fairground or the fairgrounds. The baseball diamond is off to the right. The parking lot is just off to the left, so north of the road there.
So yes, as you go down that road, there's like a little rise and a hill. And so to the left side of that road is where this particular project design rendition is addressing. Can you tell us how you got 51 kilowatts?
Well, at the very beginning of this project, John gathered, or I suppose it was Eric gathered all of the power bills for the previous year that the town of Reedfield is paying. And that is for a total of 6 different meters, different facilities where there is electrical usage being paid to Central Maine Power. And he sent those over to me. So I was able to then calculate the total annual usage of electricity in kilowatt hours over the previous year for the town of Reedfield. And then essentially we used that number to back into the size projection for this project. With a power purchase agreement, it is the responsibility of the off-taker of the town to purchase all of the electricity that the system generates. And so as a result of that, we tend to aim for about 95% of your annual usage in production. The theory being if we accidentally produce more electricity than you need, we don't want you to have to buy electricity that you're not going to use, because then you're just giving it back to Central Maine Power. And unfortunately, it doesn't just go to the people who need it the most. They send that extra revenue to their investors.
So you're paying
Yeah.
to give it to them.
So this 51, so just so I know, just so I'm because sometimes I'm a little, the 51.24, this array of solar energy is to offset the amount of energy that the town of Reedfield does. So essentially, are you saying that with this array, we will become sort of energy neutral? We have our own electricity?
That is
Okay.
that is exactly right. The only exception would be that few percentage points.
Sure. Sure.
And additionally, each one of those electrical bills carries with it a monthly meter fee of about $15.
Right.
So there'll be $15 per meter that CMP will continue to charge regardless of how much electricity you generate.
I guess I just, it's like sometimes you hear this and it's a great thing. I love it.
Yeah.
But you don't quite how does it help Reedfield?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah,
but-
so the idea then is to replace your power bill with energy payments for a period of time. Fortunately, with the exception of a term PPA, it is possible to finish paying for the solar electric system while there is still a significant life left in that project, so that you are then not paying for your electricity. You own that system, you're getting the electricity for free. And that's when the financial benefits and the real savings start to accrue to your property taxpayers.
Cool.
And on our warrant tonight, there was about $1,800 we paid Central Maine Power.
So is one of the meters are streetlights?
I'm afraid not. Streetlights are not billed on a per kilowatt hour basis.
Okay,
They're simply billed on a per streetlight basis. And
so they would not be part of
They're not part of this. Yeah.
this
correct.
energy that's generated?
That's correct.
Because that's a pretty big chunk of that 1,800. because I think that's about 500, and I think you had talked about a $1,300 bill in the chart.
This covers our buildings and our transfer station.
Right.
So there's no way to include the streetlights in that?
No.
I'm afraid not.
Is that
Something
be-
we've come up against many times, and it's frustrating for sure. But they don't have meters on them, and.
That's a CMP structure, that's not a,
Correct,
your structure.
correct. Yeah, so, the,
Also-
go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
Yeah, oh, I was just gonna say, the fundamental, regulatory building block, of the project is net energy billing. And so for every kilowatt hour that your system generates, there at the fairground, you will get a 1 kilowatt hour credit against your bill, at one of those locations. Minus about 5%, which is the reduced value of net energy billing that you may have heard about on the news. That's the new regulatory regime.
Initially, I kind of pictured the solar panels on each individual building, but the way it was explained to us is that this is more cost efficient to do it on one site. And you're basically, what you're doing is you're not running power lines from that site to the buildings, you're just feeding into CMP lines, and you're getting credit for what that solar array will put into the system, which offsets power usage in the individual buildings. Did I say that right?
Absolutely, thank you, John.
And what protects these 6 panels from the public, from wildlife, from errant bows, arrows, bats, balls? Is that included in the project? Is there any sort of fencing or?
So in order to reach regulatory compliance, each solar panel, of which there are about 150 in this project, split out into those 6 arrays that we're looking at in this picture, has webbing on the back to protect the electric components. The surface of the panels is tempered glass. They can take a baseball without cracking. But we haven't had any trouble with the 6,000 plus solar electric projects we've installed to date, many of them on the ground. We haven't had any trouble with wildlife interfering with it.
Okay.
And we haven't had any trouble with theft or vandalism. And so all I can do is fall back on history.
Okay.
But there's really, fencing is definitely an option if that's something that is of concern. But we
these are
don't.
also elevated, right? They're elevated. I mean, they're not like laying on the ground.
That's true,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
the front edge so each of those is made up of 3 rows of panels, and the
yeah.
bottom edge, and they're at about a 35-degree pitch,
Mhm.
and the bottom edge of each array is at about 3 feet.
Gotcha.
If you think this is more-
Well, I'm just thinking that we're all walking down this road to go to a ball field. And this is a public fairgrounds, it's a trail
You
area.
think people are gonna like be curious about that?
Well, yeah, and I think, for instance, there's a solar array over in Wayne, but it's up on the top of a hill where, in a road that's not very well traveled. I mean, it doesn't really, it's not a through road, and there aren't people purposefully walking past it. And so I think that's something we need to just consider.
Yeah, I think that's a discussion point that, if we proceed with the project, we could talk about our own security
Yeah.
real issue on it.
Right.
Um,
I just didn't
I
know if
will
it
say,
came
I
with
mean, I've
fencing.
driven all across the country and I see these all over the place.
Yeah, I don't.
They're on open lawns in front of buildings and so on and so forth.
It's kind of dull. I mean, there's not a whole. I mean, like no offense, but it is kind of like it's just. It looks like it looks like somebody left the hood up.
Yeah.
Why don't we let Andrew proceed
I'm
with
sorry.
a
Yeah,
few
sorry.
slides, and,
Yeah.
if we need to ask a question for clarification, but maybe get a little bit closer into the
Great.
financials.
Yeah, and just to put an end cap on the fencing discussion, if it was determined that fencing was a desirable thing to have with the system, it would be a point of discussion as to whether that would be included in the PPA as a basis part of that PPA, or whether you wanted to take care of that on the front end of the project,
Thank you.
if you chose the PPA. The microphone?
Don't get too far away from it.
Understood, okay. I do tend to wander. Moving to the cash flows, I think this is the most illustrative slide that I have to compare the two types of projects that we have been discussing. On the left, that would be if you decided to purchase the system using a municipal bond in year one, purchase it outright at full price. That light gray line that is in that chart that starts out low and then comes up to meet the other one would be if you chose to purchase the system out of capital funds that you might have on hand rather than bond it. And so what you see there is that the cost of that bond payment for 10 years at 1.5% exceeds to a noticeable degree what you would otherwise be paying for solar electricity, or excuse me, for utility electricity. So then at the end of 10 years, when you own the system outright, the line starts to climb out again. It takes about 5 years to pay the system off at that point. So you spend about 15 years down below the x-axis with that particular project. On the right, the yellow line represents the PPA, assuming a year 7 buyout, using a bonded purchase in year 7 for the buyout cost at 2%. And so what is, I think, outstanding about that, the project conceived in that way, is that the cost of the power purchase agreement and then the cost of the bond starting in year 7, those payments are estimated to always be less than what you would otherwise pay for that electricity to the utility company. So you start out on day 1 in the black and proceed forward from there so that the project is cash flow positive. It takes a little tiny bit of pressure off of your operational budget and never puts any pressure on your capital budget. And then starting in about year 15, then it's all just,
Sunshine.
climbing. What's that?
Then it's sunshine.
Then it's just sunshine after that. Yeah, free and abundant.
This is a very long-term,
Right.
arrangement to look into, so you want to be careful about it.
But
Please, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's a really great point, Bruce. I have to say it's one of the reasons that we are this project is such a slam dunk for us. We look at this and we really get excited about it. Working with municipalities is something we're very passionate about because of all of our customers. Municipalities tend to be the organizations who can really take the long view, which is when solar projects really shine. These panels carry a 25-year power production warranty, and the National Renewable Energy Laboratory studies show that they're going to last for 40 years. After 40 years, they'll still be producing at 80% of their rated efficiency. And so most organizations, certainly homeowners, but most other organizations have a really hard time looking at 15 years, let alone 25 or 40 years. But we know that the town of Reedfield is going to be here in 40 years. Your residents are still going to be paying their property taxes 40 years from now. So that's why, we get excited about working on these kinds of projects. This is another way to look at the value of these two projects. It's a little bit difficult to read what's on those bar graphs, and they're so similar. But on the left, on both of these graphs, you have the cost of doing nothing. If you decide not to move forward with the project, the amount that you're going to be paying for the electricity that could otherwise be solar electricity is about $559,000 over 40 years. And the cost of these two projects, and this is, the yellow bars there are the total cost of the two different projects. And that would include, with the PPA, the first 7 years or the first 6 years of energy payments in the PPA, the buyout cost of the PPA, plus operation and maintenance costs of the PPA over 40 years. So all of that aggregates into a number which is your 40-year cost of solar electricity. and then the same for a bonded purchase. Those two numbers are about $7,500 different from each other, so a very small margin. But it means that the savings opportunity, regardless of which of the two projects you would choose, is almost $400,000 over 40 years.
Both say PPA, though.
They do.
It's a typo, sorry.
It's a typo, so.
So the one on
first
the right,
which
the
one
one
is
on the right would be the bonded purchase.
The one on the right.
Yeah.
The outright bonded purchase?
Correct,
Okay. That was my question.
correct. So that one is just a hair more expensive in total cost than the power purchase agreement.
So the green is where we start seeing savings.
Correct. Another way of looking at the value of the solar project, currently you're paying about 12.6 cents per kilowatt hour for utility power. That's projected to increase by about 8% next year, based on the Public Utilities Commission's approval of new standard offer rates for 2018. I said next year, but I mean this year. If you look at the 40-year cost of electricity, the way we calculate that is by estimating the number of kilowatt hours of solar electricity that system might generate over the next 40 years, and dividing the total cost of the system by that number of kilowatt hours. And so then you get a 40-year cost of electricity, which in the case of the bonded buyout is about 7.1 cents per kilowatt hour, again, compared to about 12.6 that you're paying now. And the 40-year cost of energy with a PPA, that bonded buyout in year 7 is about 0.66 cents per kilowatt hour. All expectations are
And
that.
that's our fixed cost long-term.
That's the fixed cost of electricity. And if you went to an electricity supply company and asked them for a 40-year rate, they'd probably laugh you out of the room. And the utility power, we have projected to increase by 2.5 cents per kilowatt, or 2.5% per year going forward. And that comes from the National Energy Information Administration. That's their projection. And so that would mean that the 40-year cost of utility power would be closer to 20 cents per kilowatt hour.
And that's the big advantage to solar power, is that we can project our cost over those 40 years, whereas with the energy companies, it's pretty much year to year.
Yeah, that's correct.
That's what you're doing. You're laying the foundation
Right.
for fixing your energy costs. Well,
Long
I'm
term.
not gonna say forever, but
Yeah.
for, we have 3 year terms.
Yeah.
So for about 12 terms. Pretty good.
How do you take into consideration the power usage and how that will change over the years? Because obviously, I can't imagine this meeting 10 years ago had so much tech wired up and plugged in instead of running, so it's like, how much do you think about that?
Yeah, great question. So we've used historical usage to size and scale this project. If the town starts to use more electricity than they're currently using, it's always possible to come back and add a second power purchase agreement at that point. If not, the worst case scenario is that you've actually got some power bills that you're paying to the utility company in addition to using solar power. If, on the other hand, through a series of efficiency measures, the town started using less electricity, that then gives you this additional energy resource that you might not be using, and you'd be able to allocate that in other ways. For instance, if you purchased a plug-in electric fleet vehicle for the town, or offset some of your heat load away from fossil fuels into a high-efficiency air source heat pump. Those would be two really excellent ways of using that solar electricity. The value of those systems compound with the value of solar power. to make them worthwhile projects, even more so than they would be with utility power.
Thank you.
Great question, thank you. Just as a statement of qualifications, we've done many of these PPAs in Maine and New Hampshire. We're over 100 projects. We're over 8.6 megawatts. So we've done a lot of these. We've got a lot of experience doing it, and we've got a lot of happy customers. We've done it for many towns. Some that are not on here that are in the area would be Lincolnville. We just turned on the Camden, Town of Camden project just last week. Belfast started out with a small project on the roof of their public works or their public safety building, and then came back. They were so happy that they came back to do one on their landfill, much larger. South Portland's the same way. They started with a small project and then recently have moved forward with one of the biggest net build solar projects in the state at 1.2 megawatts.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big one.
I was gonna say, why is South Portland so small, but you
Yeah.
got it.
They ain't anymore.
So we're just in this picture, we're just putting the wrap on the Lincolnville project, which is a similar size to the one that we're talking about here today. And, you know, you can go by the Lincolnville Fire Department anytime to take a look at that. You can see it from the street.
So that kind of gives you a perspective as to the size of
Right.
Yeah.
what the panels would be.
Yeah, there's the Belfast landfill. Unlike the project that we're proposing right now for you guys, which would use ground screws as the solar foundation, this is on a landfill, so we couldn't penetrate the ground, which is why you see those big concrete blocks. It's a ballasted system.
That's a great way to use that land.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah, we're seeing a real explosion of landfill projects around the state right now.
And we did walk 2 hours, and that's the issue. It's a long ways
Yeah.
to run some infrastructure out there and to put in poles and everything else that we would need. And so that would actually increase the cost. So from a maintenance and every other aspect, that's why the site that you saw on this map makes more sense for Reed Field. I do want to, say we looked at other ground sites, including across the street as well. Not quite enough room in there, trees and so on and so forth.
This is perfect. It's a perfect spot for
And it's actually at the right angle and everything that Andrew was looking for.
Well, and it's great, I don't want to say advertising for your company, but advertising for solar. If a lot of people will be going by it, it will
A lot
help
of young
people to
people.
understand more
it. Yes.
or to question more.
And they'll try to hit it from the ball field. If you hit one out to the solar place,
You really have to.
you really have to tag one.
You're going to be
Yeah.
going up to the majors.
That's right.
And one of the nice things about being in a power purchase agreement is that if the system is in need of maintenance during the period of the PPA, it is the responsibility of the investor to take care of that system at that time. So no operation and maintenance costs would accrue to the town during the period of the PPA.
If this is not the right time, just tell me it'll be later, but snow removal?
Don't recommend it.
How does snow remove itself then?
We, in the scaling of the system, and in the production estimate for that system, we have assumed loss of production due to snow cover, based on the monitoring that we have on these 6,000 plus solar electric systems that we've installed in Maine and New Hampshire, and understanding that snow cover is a reality annually. So we have assumed that snow is going to stay on there until it melts off by itself. That's baked into the cash flow.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah, another good question. So, I'm sorry, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but we've got these 6,000 plus solar electric systems that we've installed, and we had that fast wind back at the end of October. We didn't lose a single solar panel off of any of our arrays during that wind. We have not lost any of the arrays during the wind that we had just a few days ago. And, you know, they're engineered for the 100-year wind down on the coast, which I think is 120 knots. So, you know, we see solar panels being installed in the same kind of racking worldwide. And you better believe that the big projects that are being installed in China are looked at on a 40-year basis, and they're not getting blown over in those 40 years. So very, very tough and able to withstand a tremendous amount of abuse from hail, which I know you guys get here because I used to work over at Lakeside Orchard. And in 2007, when I was working there, I got put out of work by a hailstorm.
That'll do it.
No, I
Wind,
believe-
and you name it. But that's a great question. Thank you.
I believe in the reading that you gave us, there's a little bit more in our packet. It talked about, I think there are two types of insurance. There's something that we would have to, as the host, would have to have a rider on our policy, but the PPA would actually have the insurance on the array itself. And is that to protect from that 120-year wind that might destroy it? Is that?
Yep,
Okay,
yep,
and
you got
so-
it.
So when you factored in our overall cost, I know you said that the maintenance was included, which was one of my questions, but does that also include some sort of a provision for an insurance payment?
That's a great question. So the cash flow that you've got right now does not include an insurance cost.
Okay. But
So that would be a great thing for, you know, to call your insurance agent, get a number so that we can plug it into that cash flow. We tend to see for a project like this, a cost of, you know, between $600 and $1,000 a year for insurance costs,
Okay.
similar to the operation and maintenance costs.
And the operation and maintenance costs includes the flat fee and the per month, per kilo, well, they're both per month. The kilowatt charge as well as the flat charge. That's in the maintenance fee, correct? And it's like the bronze, silver, gold, and platinum.
You got it.
See, I did read.
That's right. Yeah, you did. You did.
Okay.
And so, you know, in the cash flow, we have assumed that you've gone with the bronze.
And it was like around 650, I think.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. But that was in that whole overall.
It was. And the other thing in O&M in that cash flow is replacement of the inverter bank, which is projected not to last as long as the rest of the system. So a year 21 replacement of that inverter bank, which I think was a little over $3,000 or maybe a little under $4,000.
I think it was 33 something.
33, yeah.
Which is cheap compared to the 160,000 it starts at.
Right.
So,
Right. So that's one component that'll we can look forward to replacing at some point.
and you mentioned that when it becomes older, I mean, it's great that it's warranted for 25 years, but expected to last longer. That's the way warranties generally are structured. But you said they typically perform at about 80% when you're getting out to 40 years, so you wouldn't necessarily have to replace it at that point. It just wouldn't be providing you as much as it had been.
That's correct, yeah. Yeah, so
Okay.
the hope would be it would continue on beyond 40 years.
And I think
Absolutely.
there was a different projection chart that went this way, and I had to turn my computer to read it, but I think it was going down. There was like a 66,000 something that was going down each year.
Mm-hmm.
And is that what that is because it becomes slightly less efficient as it ages?
Yeah, so again, you know, referring to the National Renewable Energy Laboratories studies on these Tier 1 solar panels, the panel is warranted for 80% production after 25 years with a straight line D rate. But the National Renewable Energy Laboratory study has shown 80% production after 40 years on a straight line D rate. So you'll see in the cash flow when you are reading the numbers that I think the first column is the production estimate, how many kilowatt hours per year that system's going to generate. So it starts out at one level and then goes down by 0.5% per year after that.
Okay.
So, you know, another question somebody could ask, and I'm just going to pose it and answer it in my own best words, is that, sure, some new technology can come along and you know, be even more cost-effective, or there could be replacement type panels that are more cost effective or whatever. And that's all true, okay? But when you reduce your costs at this point in investment, you then, if there are any efficiency gains or new technologies that come online, you're saving costs off costs you've already saved. So, I mean, that's something to think about, because when you do make a 25 to 40-year decision, there are probably going to be things that change. And the thing that will be constant is our energy cost. And so whatever that technology is or looking forward, that'll be what you are measuring against. And instead of maybe antiquated systems that exist in buildings separated now, all going off on their own and becoming less efficient or needing, new equipment or whatever, so.
And when we think about technology, a lot of times we tend to think about an equivalency with computers and processing, and we're all familiar with the experience of losing compatibility with computers as time goes by. But these solar photovoltaic technology was invented in 1958, and people were using kilowatt hours back in 1958, and people are still using kilowatt hours today, and we will continue to use kilowatt hours 40 years from now as well. We're not going to change types of electricity that we're going to be using in the future.
Excellent.
Good.
Now,
you.
I guess I have a pragmatic question, and Bruce, I'm not sure if this is really for you or for Andrew or for both of you, but the proposal said that it was good for 30 days from the 18th of December, and here we are having our presentation. But this is a multi-year agreement, and I assume that even if we're going in with a PPA, that's still an agreement, even though there's no cost particularly to it, to us, because we're just transferring our electric payment from CMP to the PPA. Where does this lie with the legislative body, the voters of the town?
We would have a proposal that we would bring forward within the budget process to either do this, and that's pretty much what my intent would be. At that time, we would have any revisions that need to happen in terms of presentation and so on and so forth. So tonight's purpose was not to end up with voting tonight, for
Right.
example, within a 30-day window on something, but rather to get a proposal in front of us of what it would look like to do this in Reed Field, so that we could do whatever refinement we need to do. My belief is that we could probably do a 2019 project, but we were talking about spring of 2019, is that correct?
Yeah, so when we discussed the timeline for the project, it sounded like your annual town meeting is in June, is that
Yes.
right?
That's correct.
Currently, our installation queue is 21 weeks long. We're experiencing some growing pains.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's a good problem to have. And, of course, since we're an employee-owned company, we're very careful about who we're hiring, because they're going to be co-owners of the company with us after a year of working there. So we're growing as quickly as we can within reason. But demand is growing very quickly. We've kind of, in the growth curve of the industry in Maine, we've reached that turn of the hockey stick. And so just as a gut feeling, I don't think by June we will have shortened our installation queue. I think we're probably going to end up stuck with that 6-month installation queue, maybe even for the next couple of years. I hope not, but just reasonably. If the project is approved in June, the likelihood of installing it before the ground freezes in 2018, the likelihood is limited. It's
And
not
that's-
not
that's-
impossible.
yeah,
but limited.
That's why we were thinking it would probably be a spring.
And so then you wait till after the
2019.
thaw?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
2019, spring of 2019.
But we make the decision, so we commit to if we decide to do this, we make the decision
Yeah.
at this town meeting, and then that opens everything up
Yep.
to be able to proceed.
And what kind of pricing would we be looking at? I mean, does a proposal like this come with a guarantee of not to exceed a particular amount? Or does it get repriced at the time that we commit?
I think, so great question. The simple answer is that the project is going to change between now and town meeting. We're seeing, because solar panels are a commodity market now, we are seeing changes in the solar panel market in particular, especially because there's some reaction to the threat of trade tariffs being imposed by the federal government. So we're seeing, actually for the first time, the increase in the cost of solar panels. I do think that we're going to be looking at a different proposal in the summer. Probably the best way to proceed would be 3 weeks or so before the town meeting. We form a fresh pricing and a fresh proposal, make it available, I would assume, here at the town office for people to review in advance of the town meeting.
Our deadline's a little farther out than that.
It is. and
45
what I would-
days.
What I
So
would,
there's some-
what I
there's
would
some flexibility.
envision is that we would have a proposal in front of us that would be a guidance proposal, then that authorized the select board to enter into a do not exceed agreement.
But prior to our deadline,
Right.
which is about the end of April, middle of April, actually, we could get a revised estimate at that time that we know would probably still increase, but it would give us a better idea of, from right now, what this was in December.
And
Yeah,
we-
I think it would be easy for us to sit down and find out what you needed from a proposal at that time. We could let you know what we need, and I'm sure we could work together to come up with the right proposal for your process at that time.
Right, and I can probably provide, Andrew, or with Eric's assistance, the political timelines of when things happen. So we're not just kind of redoing this proposal every 30 days, but.
Right.
But my question to follow up on this, and obviously I'm not trying to put you on the spot cost-wise, but when you see all this green here, this $392,000 of savings, what we're talking about is, even with some increased costs up front, we're still going to have a big green bar here, a big green bar. And
Yeah.
that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah, we like
Right.
big green bars.
Yeah, that doesn't put me on the spot at all, actually. I take that as a great compliment. It's always hard to take a look at one of these proposals and say, if you could just see 15 years as a short-term way of looking at the project. Every one of these projects shakes out to be really beautiful when you look at the 40-year timeline. Very few organizations are in a position to do that. This project is particularly, I'm not going to say unique, but very rare in the fact that not only does that 40-year timeline produce a really attractive cash flow, but it is also cash flow positive from day one in an estimated way. But you're quite right to point to that green bar, and it's important to understand that green bar is based on assumptions. And so as we move forward, and as you folks delve into the cash flow, you can let me know which assumptions you're most comfortable making. And I'm always happy to field those kinds of conversations and turn the dials on the cash flow so that we know what we're looking at in a way that helps you make the decision as to what's best for the town of Reedfield.
Right, and so in saying that, if our cost is .066, for example, if all this math works out that it's .068, we're still gonna have a big green bar there, is what my point is the long-term savings that we're talking about.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah,
questions?
Part of the schedule between now and writing a warrant
Mhm.
Is to have a hearing, a public hearing,
Yes.
where Andrew would come and answer questions from the public as to the project itself. And then we would put it in the warrant. So it's something that would have to be approved by the voters. It's not something that we five would be committing to without voter input. And then once it's voted on, I guess my question now is to you. Between June and the spring of 2019, we would not see, you would commit to a cost as of when we sign the contract. So if there are any increases in cost between June and spring, would not affect us.
Yeah, that's correct. Essentially, when we receive signed closing documents from you, then we can pull financing from our capital partner and proceed with equipment acquisition so that we've locked in the cost for
Okay.
ourselves
Yep.
of that installation.
Think of it as buying a house that you're not gonna
Right.
occupy for a few months.
And contracts like that are generally like, you're not gonna get us on the other end because something went up. It's like, oh, well, you know what I mean?
But if we change things, then the
Right.
cost changes.
Right.
Right, but Andrew's also saying he can make commitments to buy equipment and
Right.
line up
Yeah.
things.
Yeah,
think
so
anything
once
to
we're
that.
under contract, you know,
Yep.
if in June, the voters approve the town warrant and we produce closing documents and receive them back signed, you know, within 30 days, then the price of the project is fixed, and the rate schedule and the buyout cost is specified.
To follow up on John's question, and I'll be brief, do you, from Revision Energy, you or anybody, have sort of a canned presentation that can be used for municipalities? Or do you come and do a specific presentation? I'm thinking of for our public, you know, something that just explains what the whole process is regardless of what town it is or what size it is. Because we had a lot of questions and answers, and there were only 7 of us in the room. And if we had a room of 50 people, I think it might be much bigger.
I absolutely do have a canned presentation, and, you know, it's more or less what I came and presented back in the spring,
Okay.
yeah.
And it-
But a lot of Reedfield-specific information is very helpful. I mean, and
Right.
that's what citizens.
Well, and Bill's very good about being able to most likely pull what we just had tonight and be able to run that as a loop at different times. So people who are truly interested and really want the nitty-gritty could listen to our discussion, and that doesn't need to be represented.
Right.
We just need a base presentation so that people can get an idea of what it is.
There's, should also be something that we can put on the website, that's not just on the video, but on the website as a proposal, or
Yeah, I
where
think.
people can go on the website and
See this so-called canned performance?
Yeah, well, yes, I think that's a good idea, and so we'll make a note of that, Chris, and see if we can do something in that regards. I had hoped that there would be some members of the Budget Committee that would be able to drop by tonight. They're not here, and I'm going to encourage them to perhaps look at the video of tonight, and obviously we'll be sharing information with them, and they'll be reviewing that as well, because their recommendation will be just as important, and particularly where we're looking at a decision that's very long-term for the town. I think we have the right people in that Budget Committee to give us some good advice and to look at contracts and so on and so forth. It's a solid group that needs to have as much information as possible, so we'll be trying to work with them in regards to this as well. Are there any other questions for Andrew? Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate you coming tonight. There's more process to this, and so you'll be hearing more about it, and we'll be in continual contact with you as we move forward. And, you know, if you need any information from us, just pick up the phone, ask Eric or whatever. We will get you some more timeline information so we can kind of put that out there and know when we should be talking about what.
It must be interesting going to different towns and the learning curve that you see us making.
And my learning curve, too.
Right. And, you know, small town, big town,
Right.
school versus government.
I'd also say too, like, thank you, John and Bruce, for your work on this.
Yes.
I think it's fantastic,
Yes.
and I also, how seldom do we celebrate the proactive choices of municipal government? So it like, hey, you know, we'll all be dead and gone, but those photos,
I
photovoltaic cells.
won't be.
Okay, sorry, but that's okay. Down the road is what I'm saying. But my point is, it's
This project
thank you.
will give you something to live for.
That's it. Yes, finally.
Okay, in 40 years, I'll be dead.
Yes. So thank you, colleagues.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thanks,
thank you.
Bruce. And
Thank you for
and
the
thank you
Thank
to
you.
all the members of the board for taking the time to really delve into the details on this project. I'm really proud of the proposal that we've brought to the table today. And I'm glad to perceive that, I think I'm perceiving some excitement about the idea. So I really appreciate that. Thanks
And-
also to the other folks that came tonight and anybody who might be watching now or in the future.
They're all watching.
You know, having been part of this from the beginning, I'm picking up stuff every time, you know, we talk to Andrew, every time we get together, every time we have a meeting, it's, you know, there's new information that gets crammed into this old brain.
Or it just finally sinks in, right?
Finally sinks in, I think that's what it is, yeah.
But you also look at some of those towns up there. It's like there's some very nice towns, coastal towns, very cool places in Maine that we have a chance to be a part of, and I think that's
That's right.
a great thing about Reedfield. We deserve it.
Well, thank you. And I guess I'll just wrap it up by saying that, you know, I think the financials are one piece of this, but I also think it's a responsible thing that government can undertake and do, so.
I think
With-
the other
Yep.
side of this is to take a look at how much we're contributing to cutting down on the, you know, carbon that we're throwing up
Absolutely.
in the air.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, this is a pretty green town. People are pretty
Yeah.
interested in
That's right, man.
being kind to the environment.
Okay, well, we'll move on in the agenda.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will go to 18084, which is to consider a draft of the first set of departments for the, and this is, I believe, general government for the most part, for fiscal year 2018, 2019. Now, normally, the way this would work is, this is kind of information given to you for any questions you might ask
It's a
of
book.
Eric
See,
tonight.
a Mac.
And so Eric is not here, but if there are some general questions that you want to bring forward or just note or something you noticed, please make a comment now. If not, we'll, you know, this is all part of the long-term approval project, process for the budget itself. I will just make one note, because there's almost like a missing column on this particular, and I did talk with Eric about this, and if you take a look, at, well, look at any page, okay?
Oops, sorry.
At the top of the page, bear in mind that these are fiscal years. So we are in fiscal year 2018 right now, okay? The two columns that you see to the right, okay, are actually the fiscal year 19 change, okay? What I would have liked to have seen in between
Was the
those
19.
columns was 19. So you would actually see the numbers. So I will give you an example here. If you take a look at, for example, page 5, which is the general government total, which is about a 3% increase. Fiscal year 2018, which is the current year, okay? is running at $456,000, okay? And you do see our year-to-date expenditure there, which is about halfway through the year, so that seems to be making a lot of sense. If you look at the initial request, versus current budget change, this is the initial request, it says $14,311. So you're missing a column that would say, this is $470,000.
Right.
Okay.
The addition to,
Okay.
that would be our next call.
Right.
Gotcha,
Yeah.
gotcha.
So,
And
without that, it makes it, you have
a
to
little
keep doing
harder.
a little math in your head.
Yeah, gotcha.
And so I believe in future renditions of this, we will see that column.
Okay, yeah, that will be helpful.
And I guess I would just ask that we have the FY labeled fiscal year.
That's a good idea.
And personally, for me, it's not a real big deal, but I think for the general public, if it could say FY 15-16, it is more meaningful to people, because then they understand what 16 means. Is it what started in 16, or is it what ended in 16? And it's what ends, and rather than writing that everywhere, if you just put FY 15-16,
I'll mention that to Eric, because we want to make this understandable. And it's not, I don't want to sit up here and be, adding things in my head and
Right.
trying to show off like I'm smarter than everybody else and read this document, when really what I want it to do is be a common document both us and the public are using. So we're on the same page,
Yep.
quote unquote.
right.
Yeah,
Oh,
two
And I'm
different
sure
copies
that's
is
just an
terrible.
omission,
Yeah.
I'm sure it was there last year.
I think there's some tinkering that can be done with some of the initial requests. They can be a little bit smaller, and I'm sure we'll get guidance through the Budget Committee and so forth in regards to that.
Are you going to take that up with Eric, or do you want that in these notes? You're going to take that up with Eric?
I can take it up with Eric, but you're more than welcome to put it in the notes, too. It's up to you.
All right.
Well, I think as with anything, if you look at, for instance, the boards, committees, and commissions on page 10,
Yep,
that comes up with a 372% increase.
right.
But you have to look at what that is. That's on a total amount of $8,900.
Right.
Now, so a 300%, almost 400% increase is huge, but it's on a small amount.
Yeah.
I still want to know what it's for and why that's happening. But that's the kind of delving that we need to make people aware of. It's not that the whole budget is going up 400%. It's this particular piece, and then you have to know why, so.
And I believe this first round of information is actually going to the Budget Committee, so
Yeah.
they'll do quite a bit of the nitty-gritty on that.
That's why they're the Budget Committee.
That was the email, I think, that Andy Holman sent out asking us if we would please look at this, and
Right.
the Budget Committee as well, because.
Yep. And board members can go to any Budget Committee meeting. You're more than welcome to do that at any time.
We have our
We've
workshop.
had board members in the past that have attended every single one, and then some of us just when we interface, whatever works for you. Just stay informed about it, I guess. So we'll see further custom budget reports coming to us, and we'll have some refinement on how they're presented.
Great.
Any other questions or comments on these pages?
No, sir.
Great.
Just thank you for having them put together, Eric,
Yes.
and the
Thank you,
rest of
Eric.
the employees.
Wherever
Yes.
you may infirm. Down the road.
Just to note that we do have a workshop on Thursday night here, and that'll be a workshop on basically to discuss the process of ordinance development and review and prioritize work for the upcoming town meeting for 2018. And I would say that even beyond, what
Is this going to be
ordinance-
kind of like another goal-setting thing, like we did with the retreat?
Well, I think it'll roll in that fashion.
Okay,
I think
gotcha.
first we would want to discuss some of the parameters in terms of how do we choose ordinances that we need to present,
Yeah.
for example, are some vastly out of date,
Right.
or some state law is now telling us we got to do something.
Yeah.
There's some hierarchy in terms of that. And then there's also some consideration as to how many ordinances you want to put on a ballot and explain and so on and so forth.
Right, you want to limit that, I see. And the other thing, let me ask you this.
You want it
Bruce.
to be right, and then there's,
Yeah.
there's some ordinances that come to us, like the PACE ordinance did last year.
Right.
That is just a boilerplate
Right.
ordinance
Yeah.
that allows town members to do something, so you want to also take care of those as well.
The last question is, the goals that we had set, it was in the packet in terms of things that we talked about at the retreat. Will we be able to sort of say, we took care of some of that? Will we eliminate some of those that we did, or at least mark them as resolved?
Well-
I think about the cannabis stuff, since there's nothing really happening.
Right.
Was one of the examples. We've already had our kind of abbreviated little meeting, certainly.
Let me give my stock speech on goals, which is their goals.
Yeah, they're always goals.
Their
Gotcha.
goals.
Gotcha.
And in terms of what we'll be doing on the 11th, that'll be part of what we're doing in terms of revising and drafting governance documents as needed, which will
Gotcha.
probably always be our goal. The cannabis one may be very tied up with the state.
Yeah.
We're moving along on renewable energy, we saw
Yes.
tonight. You and I need to meet with Eric on the property tax assistance one. We need to get that nailed down.
I see in the Townsman that there's a proposal to address property taxes for elderly, for,
Was that in the one that just came out?
yeah. And that particular, what do they call it?
Issue.
Issue is pretty well explained in the Townsman, so it'd be something.
Yeah.
you
Oh,
know,
good. Good. I'm sure it's in
folks to
my
look at,
packet.
yep.
All right, because that was one that we wanted on for this year.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
because there's some that I.
Well, we actually wanted to actualize that even earlier to
Yeah.
effect this
Right.
year, but it just was not gonna happen.
Yeah.
But we
Yeah.
do wanna get it done
Yeah.
for this warrant.
Yeah, for this warrant.
And I like the idea of where we're headed on Thursday, because I think select boards over historical time in Reedfield, especially say in the last 5 years, have had vastly different approaches to how they do those revisions. However, we did come up in our goal-setting plan with certain ones that we knew we wanted to work on. And I have put in quite a bit of time on those, so I would like to see us move those forward as we're doing all of this on Thursday. I would like to see us consider those. I don't think they've lost any merit, so I'm hoping the work wasn't for naught that I did. Sort of like the work we did on renewable energy, it's still gonna follow through, so I'm very interested in what we're gonna do Thursday, it'll be great.
Good, well, we'll
And that's
try to.
6:30 to 8?
Yes.
That's correct,
Okay.
and,
Hey,
yes,
Could someone also make sure that Les
I wrote
Priest
it down
is
for-
notified for the next?
I wrote it down.
I think it'd be an excellent,
It's a no-brainer for him on
Addition
the
to
enterprise
that
committee,
committee,
isn't
yeah,
it?
it really
He's
is.
selling half of Reedfield.
yeah, yeah.
Well, I had talked to him about it, and,
I think it'd be a very good
yeah,
addition.
Yes.
to the committee.
Robin gave me that to send him so that he could.
Yeah.
I'll take a motion to
I'll
adjourn.
make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
It's been moved and seconded to adjourn, all in favor? We are adjourned.